Hi guys, Buildzoid here. Remember this thing? This is the GTX 780 Ti DirectCU2 that somebody sent in. So big thanks to them for sending it in. And now originally when this card turned up, it didn't work. It does work now. So I'm gonna sort of walk you through the process that I went through to repair this card. So the first thing I did, which is actually not advisable, but on first inspection, I didn't see anything obviously like wrong with the card. Um, so I basically the first thing I did is I put the card in in the system and turned it on. And actually, at the time that I did that, I actually noticed that the issue with this card is that this PCIe slot is really like I don't know how it'll show up on camera, but that is warped. That is like really warped in that area. The PCB is. It basically looks like so. This the person who sent this card to me actually got it on eBay um, as working. So yeah, that was a they did get a refund from what I heard, and they got to keep the card, and so they sent it to me. And well, I'm not sure how. Well, you can kind of see that basically there's a big freaking crack in the PCB right there. So I got the card and I went to install it in a system. I did at that point in time, before I actually installed it, I did notice the crack in the PCB. So when I was turning this on, I was watching the PCIe slot pretty intently, expecting like potentially a puff of smoke because there might be a short circuit down there. You never know when you crack a multi-layer PCB, you might be creating short circuits or all kinds of damage in the process. But all that really happened with this card is it didn't turn on. So as in like literally didn't turn on, like no display output. The motherboard doesn't even know the card was installed. So that then came the question, okay, so why is it not turning on? And turns out, and so what I did was I basically just started checking voltages. The first thing I do with any card where you don't have any obvious damage, like even this crack is pretty obvious, but I don't know what that crack actually cut. So the first question is, well, do we have all our necessary voltages? Because basically, as long as the card gets its vCore, its memory, and any other voltages it really needs, it should work. So that's what I did. Memory worked, vCore didn't. So that was a really quick and easy troubleshooting session right there. vCore VRM is evidently not working. Why is it not working? That was the question, right? Well, turns out now, this crack right here goes straight through the 5 volts power plane, which is what this big red wire is for. So this VRM uses International Rectifier 3598s and an ASP 1211 Digi Plus voltage controller. So that's a rebranded International Rectifier part, and I'm saying that's an International Rectifier part on the basis that these dual drivers are International Rectifier parts as well. So this right here is actually a real 8-phase. Those are two drivers built into one chip. So that's a real 8-phase. That's not a doubled up 4-phase or something like that. This is a real 8-phase. The other way you can tell this is a real 8-phase is there's actually 8 phases worth of current sensing circuitry hanging around the Digi Plus voltage controller. So yeah, VRM is a real 8-phase, but it's not turning on, and it uses these IR3598s. So I go and I get the data sheet for the IR3598s because if you actually trace it out, which this is a black PCB, so tracing these things is a nightmare. But if you go from these IR3599s, there's this big fat trace, and fat trace means power, like some kind of big heavy power, power line. So big fat trace, and it goes right along the bottom edge of the PCB to where the crack is. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, so I'm either missing gate drive, or I'm missing straight up like the voltage that these IR3599 98s run on. That's straight up missing. Turns out that is exactly what was happening. After checking the data sheet and soldering a little wire to a resistor hanging around these IR3598s, I found that hey, there's actually no voltage going to the VCC pin, which is the pin that's where the 3598 gets its power from, and it's supposed to be at 5 volts. So you trace along this power plane, and I noticed that this LDO right here, because there's really no, like, if you look around this board, right? There's nothing else really on there that could that is some kind of low like another voltage regulator, because you need like the PCIe slot is 3.3 and 12 volts. So there's no 5 volt source on this board. Like you can't pull 5 volts from the PCIe slot. So the board has to create its own 5 volts somewhere. And the obvious suspect is this big thing, because that's that is a typical LDO package, especially for a higher power LDO. This is a really popular package. So is this a 5 volt LDO? Turns out that with the card running and stabbed it with a multimeter, yep, that does spit out 5 volts. And would you know it, that thing's the output pin of that thing is shorted to a voltage read point on that power plane that's cut right around here. So at that point, it was a simple matter of choosing a convenient place to put a wire and run 5 volts through a wire to there. So that's what this big red wire is for. I've run it through the screw holes for stress relief. So, if I pull on this thing, you can see that it doesn't actually put it doesn't put strain on the actual solder joints. So that's why it's run through the screw holes like that. It's just basically a safety feature to make sure that I don't rip the PCB up with it. If that wire gets caught on something, it shouldn't really damage the PCB too much. So yeah, so I supplied 5 volts to the VRM, and now the VRM fires up. We get voltage output. The voltage output is 0.9 volts, which is in spec for an NVIDIA, like for boot voltage. That's normal. Most VRMs will boot up at 0.9 volts. So that's great. But now the card is throwing an error that the two PCIe 8 pins aren't connected. And now this is something I've never dealt with, because I don't know how that works, because you'd need like design documentation from like NVIDIA to know how that system works. And the way that works, which I now know thanks to Elmore from Asus. So Elmore is a engineer at Asus ROG. He worked on things like the Crosshair 7 Hero that recently came out. He also recently posted a really like epic Geekbench 3 world record for 8-core CPUs with a 5.7 gigahertz Ryzen 7 2700X. So yeah, and he's a very busy guy, but he found time in his day to basically help me repair this thing. So the way the PCIe 8-pin power is actually detected on one of these cards is there's GPIO pins going from the GPU core to this area of the PCB, and then there's 2 transistors up here, which I've removed. But basically, those 2 transistors, if the 8 pins aren't plugged in, or at least if the transistors don't recognize that the 8 pins are plugged in, because remember, there's a great big crack down here, and I don't know how many traces and what signaling is damaged and what isn't. So I don't actually know why these 2 transistors weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, as probably because something for those 2 transistors is disconnected thanks to that crack. But basically, those transistors were refusing to acknowledge that the 2 8 pins were actually plugged in, and what they would do is they would pull down the GPIO lines from the GPU core. They would pull them to 0. And so the way to fix that is you remove the 2 transistors, and bam, suddenly suddenly the card is no longer able to actually detect if the 2 8 pins are plugged in or not. So, it's a hell of a hack. Like that's a hell of a hack to do, because yeah, the card now has no idea if the 8 pins are plugged in or not, and that has some potential some pretty serious hazards to it, right? Because you could boot this card with no 8 pins and burn the PCIe slot or burn out the VRM. Like, you could do some damage with it. So there's a good reason for those to exist, but basically by removing them, the card now does turn on. And huge thanks to Elmore for basically taking time out of his day to help me fix that, because that is one of those, like, this is one of those things that, like, if you don't have a schematic for the PCB, you're not fixing this, as far as I know. Well, you'd have to have at least some idea of how NVIDIA cards do their power connector detection, which, again, like, good luck finding a schematic that, like, covers that. So yeah, huge thanks to Elmore for basically helping me repair the card, and it does now work because the card no longer knows how many 8 pins or 6 pins are plugged into it. It always thinks that they're plugged in, and it does work. At least as far as getting into the BIOS goes. I don't know what condition the actual core is in. I've not tried to run any benchmarks on it yet, because when I got the card working, I didn't have an operating system with any NVIDIA drivers on it. So, yeah, but the card does work, and I'm really happy about that, actually. Like, yeah, hell yeah, I got a card working. I actually think this is probably my first ever repair. Like, because normally what happens is I go buy something that works and then start cramming mods on it until I break it. And when I break things, I don't do I don't do repairable style damage. Okay, I do the kind of damage where the GPU core got a shot of 2 volts, so the memory controller is destroyed, or the actual core itself is just completely destroyed. So there's nothing you can do at that point except like buy a different chip, which that's not really an option. So yeah, I'm really happy. Like I'm surprised that I managed to fix this. Um, but yeah, this is this is freaking awesome. Like I managed to actually fix a GPU. Um, and so now I can run 2-way SLI with 780 Ti's. I'm not, I don't think I'll run it on liquid nitrogen just because 780 Ti's do hog power, and also 2-way SLI on 780 Ti's isn't really worth that many points. So I'm thinking more, I'm definitely going to test both cards on the Morpheus air cooler, but I'm not thinking about running it on LN2, but I'm thinking about doing it on dry ice. Doing this card and the 780 Ti classified I have, both of them on dry ice because, dry ice is, a lot. It's not really cheaper for me than LN2. It's just much more readily available. It's not like it's on a 6 week delivery cycle. And the other thing is, it's easier to work with, as 780 Ti's have a cold boot bug at or no, they have like a cold bug at like minus 100 or below that even. So I shouldn't have problems with the card randomly shutting down on me. Now, I'm certainly not done in terms of abusing the PCB on this thing because, as far as I know, you can't get like full range voltage control on NVIDIA cards. So I'm going to be doing a hard mod for the voltage control on this thing. Um, and I'm not sure if I'll actually turn that into a video where I actually show you the process that I go through. The card does have voltage VRM hot wire points right here, so Asus actually these exist to make volt modding easy, but I'm not sure. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'll have to do some more research about that, but yeah, at the very least, the card now runs. So I will be checking out if it overclocks, and if it does, then yeah, I'm going to town on this thing and volt modding it for vCore control, for memory control, and then we're running then we're running it as on air cooling for now, and when I do get dry ice, probably on dry ice. So yeah, I can repair things. I am capable of doing more than just destroying PCBs. Admittedly, I did need help from somebody who actually has access to the data sheets and stuff. So yeah, again, just huge thanks to Elmore for taking time out of his day to help me fix this thing. Um, so yeah, and that's that's kind of that. And actually, to anybody wondering if you can send in dead cards, I'll put it this way: if the card has a dead core, I'm stealing I'm stealing the VRM. If the VRM is damaged, it's actually potentially repairable. If there's something wrong with the card where um, if you have a card where the VRMs are fine, right, but you get into Windows and then you install your drivers and the card crashes, that's a pretty good indicator that there's something wrong with the core itself, like the silicon. And it basically usually it'll mean you either have it's either degraded, like very very heavily degraded. You can actually like I've done it. I've degraded cards to the point where they literally wouldn't turn on anymore because they were just dead. There's a certain GT730 where I decided I had enough of the card and shoved like 2.3 volts into it at like minus 50 degrees centigrade or something. I mean Celsius, and well, it did not work ever again. That's for sure. Um, Very anticlimactic, mind you. Shoving 2.3 volts into a GPU core doesn't make it explode. It just makes it stop working. So basically, if you have like VRM is fine, but the core doesn't work, that's not repairable because you need a new core. And the other one is if you get into Windows and you manage to install drivers and then the card starts artifacting like crazy or crashing under 3D workload, again, it might be degraded, or you have damaged or you have damage done to the flip chip ball grid array. So the actual connection between the silicon and the green PCB right here, so the substrate, if that connection is damaged, which it like that connection gets damaged literally by just changing temperatures over time. And some GPUs are more susceptible to it than others. Like I think GTX 480s and like older NVIDIA and ATI cards are actually really, really common to have that issue, where basically the connection between the silicon and the substrate gets broken, and that connection, like you can fit that's the cards that people manage to bake back to life at like 180 degrees Celsius. um, those are cards with FCBGA damage. Those are cards where the silicon and the substrate are disconnected because that connection is not you can't reflow it. That's not solder. That's literally just like it's basically just crushed. Like the contacts basically get crushed into each other, and that's pretty much it. And also the reflow temperature for lead-free solder, which is what you have on all of your GPUs, is like 217 to 227 degrees. Um, so yeah, you're not reflowing in an oven at 180. But if the card starts working, it basically means that you've managed to thermal shock the contacts on the silicon back into alignment with the contacts on the substrate. And it might work for the next hour, it might work for the next year or several years. It really varies. It's just because basically it's random chance that the core died, and it's random chance that now it works again. So it's a random chance when it'll die again. So that kind of repair, like those kinds of cards, I'm just going to take the VRM off because I quite frankly don't care to have a card randomly drop out on me on liquid nitrogen. It's just like, well, it's just like, I don't like random chance, so that I wouldn't consider repairable. But cards where you have VRM damage, the one thing I will say, if you have a blown high side MOSFET, don't turn the card on. Absolutely do not turn the card on, because every time you try to turn that, especially if that card is one of the, like if you have a motherboard or a GPU where if you plug it into a power supply and you try to turn the damn thing on and it immediately like it blips power and then shuts down, you probably have a blown high side MOSFET. And what's happening is basically you get 12 volts passing through that MOSFET straight into whatever's on the other side of the VRM. So that's going to die very soon if you keep doing that, or is already dead. And basically that'll pull so much current so quickly that the power supply's protections will kick in and stop that. So that's like, if you have a card with a blown out VRM, I would recommend not trying to turn it on, because depending on how the VRM blew up, it may or may not kill whatever's on the other side of it. That's the main risk with damaged VRMs, is like, depending on the kind of damage, the VRM can actually output way higher voltage than it's supposed to, and if it does that, it's going to kill whatever's on the other side. So, yeah, but VRM damage is that's actually relative, like, like PCB damage is that's the kind of stuff I'd consider repairable. Core damage don't really repairable, and cards with dead cores are still perfectly good donors for VRMs, because if the VRM still works, I can just put it on a different card. And I never have I don't think I'm ever going to run into a situation where I'll have too many power boards, because if I have one card where I decide to do an e-power, and then it has like a memory VRM and a, you know, VDDCI, and you e-power the V-core, and then the VDDCI drops out, well, I need another VRM for the VDDCI at that point, or the memory, or, you know, whatever just dropped out, I need to get a new VRM for it. So, yeah, that's kind of that. I'll take dead cards for sure, because I can definitely find a use for them. Either way, I'm really, really happy that I got the 780 Ti working again, and this is not the last of it. Like, this is not the last of what you've seen of it. It's getting vault modded eventually, that's for sure. But before that, I want to run some benchmarks on it while it still bloody works before I break it again. So yeah, that's it for the video. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment or any questions or suggestions down below if you're interested in sending you know, GPUs in, dead or alive. I really don't care. Send an email to buildzoid@gmail.com, and there we can discuss the details of that. Honestly, at this point, I'm starting to feel like I have a little too many GPUs piling up, but hey, that just means I need to step up my murder game. That doesn't mean I need to stop getting GPUs. I need to just kill them faster. Um, but yeah, so that's the thing. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a PayPal, a Patreon. There's also shirts you can buy. You can find a link to all of that down in the description below. Thanks for watching, and see you all next time. Yeah, where's that stop button? There it is.